Nigga, this is what that jungle do. You been plotting, nigga, wasn't you? I should've never even fuck with you. Yeah, I started in the back, had to skip the line, no, I'm
There's much more, however, to turmeric than just skin and inflammation, and many of you have asked me to talk about the anti-cancer benefits and prevention. Today, we'll do just that. I'll look at a newer study that is talking about how there's a mechanism of action for starving cancer cells that's different from the one that we typically think of, which is inflammation. Of note here, MD Anderson, amongst many other cancer centers, have indeed tested it for cancer of the pancreas and done detailed analysis of dosage and bioavailability. Many other cancers as well, and I'll outline today. Its attraction is that it blocks that major step that causes cancer, one that links inflammation to cancer and cancer progression. If you follow my videos, you know we oft talk about inflammation, inflammaging, and the fact that turmeric, amongst other supplements, I'll say, or foods, attacks things as an anti-inflammatory. But curcumin is the only drug we have that blocks this particular step. Number one, yes, I called it a drug. I'd say it's the closest supplement we have to becoming a drug. One big stumbling block for being FDA approved is it has poor absorption. So we have to establish a cause and effect. That's very hard when you can't get predictable levels from eating it. Now, you can give it IV. I've had it personally IV. So you put an IV line in, you put a bag up of curcumin, it takes about an hour to get, because it does burn a little bit, you drip it in. Now, I have no vested interest. I don't have an IV bar. I don't do IV infusions of curcumin. I'm just sharing that with you. As a side note, curcumin, as a reminder, is the active ingredient in turmeric. So turmeric, whether you take it as the root or you take it as a supplement, the active form is curcumin. That's why I'm saying curcumin and turmeric interchangeably. Number two in there of note is that inflammatory pathway is known, but today I'm going to show you one different pathway that people are looking at, which is the energy pathway. But first, understand there are existing today over 4,000 published studies that describe the anti-cancer effects of curcumin. Today's study, as I said, is going to be about that additional mechanism that starves the cancer cell of energy. Keep in mind the cost benefit of curcumin is highly favorable with minimal downside. So the fact that it's not an FDA approved drug, understanding that some supplements that we take do have a lot of side effects. Coming to mind would be something like garlic, and I have videos on that. I like garlic, but a lot of people can't take it. Keep in mind the cost benefit of curcumin is highly favorable with minimal downsides. You can't say that of all supplements such as garlic. Sometimes garlic, not everyone can take it, and that's why we look at things like black garlic that have more favorable side effect profiles often in our patients. In fact, studies have been done with turmeric of about 8 grams. If you take on average a supplement, that's about 800 milligrams. So 1/10 the dose is what you see in your supplements. If you're already supplementing with it, look on your vitamin, it will be labeled. Here's mine, you can see there's 800 milligrams. I add ginger, quercetin, bioperine. Now I talked about the absorption. Pepper is something that increases it multiple fold for absorbing it if we're taking it orally. Now if you're using turmeric root, taking pepper helps. Absorption is a very key element with turmeric. Also, as an aside, we often think that maybe the turmeric doesn't just get its effect from being in the bloodstream, but actually affects the gut and has such a favorable profile in the gut that there's mechanism of action through the bowel without it even having to be absorbed. So you can see many more studies are coming, but let's get into today's one on starving cancer. So cancer cells are, in simple terms, cells that are growing out of control. They're not abiding by the cell reproduction limiting mechanisms that our body has in place. Thus, cancer cells require a tremendous amount of energy to promote this rapid growth. This new study we're talking about today shows how curcumin can selectively starve tumor cells. Selectively is going to be a key. This mechanism is especially appealing for cancer chemoprevention because it would target the great majority of cancers because this pathway exists in many cancers. I'll outline a few specific cancers at the end that have been extensively studied with curcumin. The starving we're talking about occurs by depriving the cells of their ability to make and use ATP. Many of you have heard of this. It's an energy currency within the cells, adenosine triphosphate. Since most cancer cells generate ATP in a different way than healthy cells, the curcumin selectively kills tumor cells with no impact on the healthy tissues. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with any form of chemotherapy. We wanted to target, and that's why you hear of gene targeting is the next big thing. You see, cancer cells have a very unusual oxygen-free mechanism of extracting energy from glucose to produce this ATP. It's what makes them function or allows them to do this. Normal cells, they do require a lot of oxygen, and this is normally one of those limiting factors that I mentioned that stops out of control growth. But the cancer cells, on the other hand, they can survive in this low oxygen environment because they can grow rapidly without it. So by attacking that mechanism, that's a very specific way to target fast-growing cells. Since many types of cancer use this metabolic kind of a trick to extract the energy, the researchers studied curcumin's impact on a variety of tumor cell lines. So in this study, they didn't just look at one tumor cell line. They looked at things like leukemia, breast, melanoma, and colon cancers. Let's look at the findings here. I'll outline them in rough form, and then we'll look at the study to see some key points. So that way, if you do want to read the full study yourself, you can look at it. But what are the key findings that those that want to extract that from this video first? The first part of the study showed that curcumin was able to reduce the levels of ATP synthase. That's the enzyme that creates ATP in all 4 tumor cell lines in culture. Number 2, they found that it could reduce the cellular levels of ATP in 3 of the 4 cell lines that we have in the body. For those wanting to geek out a little bit more, the 4 cell lines are epithelial, endothelial, neuronal, and fibroblast. But number 3, they found there was a lower ratio of higher energy ATP to lower energy AMP in all 4 cell lines. So that's one thing. So they're showing that it can reduce the amount of energy available. Number 2, the next step, they implanted aggressive skin cancer cells or melanoma cells into live mice. Half of the mice were treated with curcumin and the other half served as a control group. Just 2 days into the study, the curcumin treated mice were demonstrating significantly slower tumor growth. The tumor growth had remained significantly slower for the entire period of the study. Not surprisingly, and here's the kicker, the ATP synthase, ATP levels, and the ATP to AMP ratio were significantly lowered in the curcumin group. These results give us a clue that the energy starvation was the mechanism of action by which curcumin slowed this growth. One of the energy starvation treatments we do for tumors is to cut off the blood supply by embolization, but it's much better to do this with a non-toxic supplement if possible. In other words, we know the tumors need more blood supply to grow. So radiologically, you can put a catheter in, you could find out where the tumor's growing the most, and boom, just like a stroke in the brain is where you stop blood supply to an area, that's a negative kind of a stroke. You can induce a stroke to a tumor so that you get less blood flow to it. But this would do it through a supplement, through a non-toxic element. That's the idea here. Slow down blood supply. Next is, can the curcumin prevent new blood vessel growth? So cancers need this blood vessel growth and development to support all the nutrients of these rapidly growing cells. Blocking this process is an important way to limit the growth and the spread of a tumor. After removing the tumors from the mice, in this exact study, the researchers found that the curcumin supplemented animals' tumors had fewer new blood vessels. So there you go. Again, that other mechanism of action seems to be at play. This indicates that the curcumin reduced the tumor's nutrient energy access by limiting blood flow. So there's a lot to unpack here. And